And I think anybody that's got a loved one that wants to age in place, do it with dignity and being able to provide an adult to be able to live as independently, as functionally independent as possible is really the biggest gift I think you could give your loved one.
Hey y'all, this is Kosta, and today I'm here with my guests Cindy Hardin-Weiss and Christina Hardin-Weiss, co-founders of Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner, working to enhance continuity of care from healthcare facility to home, increase client and caregiver safety during daily care, and improve and maintain the client's optimal level of functional independence. Today we're talking about home modifications, adaptive equipment, and aging in place. Welcome to the show, Cindy and Christina. Would you start by telling us a bit more about Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner and your experiences in the care industry overall?
Thanks for having us, Kosta. We really appreciate being on here. My name is Christina. I'm a speech therapist. I've been practicing for probably around 25 years, and most of my career has been in long-term care. And I'm Cindy, and I'm a physical therapist. I have been practicing for about 30 years, and most of my care has been in the home health setting as well.
Very cool. So what got you into this industry?
Well, I knew I wanted to be in healthcare.
Okay.
I didn't realize that I kind of fell into the geriatric population. It wasn't something that I planned. I had a graduate assistantship where I worked at a VA center near my college, or my university. And the second I walked through the door, I knew it was exactly what I wanted to do. Long-term care was for me. And so it's something that I've always enjoyed working with the adult population, stroke rehab in particular, and people living with dysphagia.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
And I've just, I've loved the geriatric population all along. I think about my second job was home health and fell in love with home health. I love the atmosphere. I love being in other people's spaces. You really get to know them a little bit better. And so really fell in love with that and just kind of stayed with that for most of my career.
Amazing. Well, this is going to be an exciting episode talking about minor home modifications, talking about adaptive equipment. I think a lot of times when people are nearing retirement or when they need long-term care, they don't really think about that 2-story house with 3 bedrooms upstairs. You know, that was pretty much the predominant build through most of the 90s and 2000s. So a lot of people are having to figure out what to do.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
So on that note, AARP found 80% of Americans turning 65 want to age in place. What are the top 3 pieces of adaptive equipment you believe every senior should have in their home to ensure their independence and quality of life?
Mm-hmm. So what I would say is, as far as adaptive equipment, it may not be specifically adaptive equipment, but to age comfortably, the 3 of the top areas that we are always telling people to check are your toilet height. A lot of times it's too short. Your comfy chair height, because as we age and as we get a little bit weaker, our comfy chair becomes a little bit too low sometimes. And then the bed height, because our bed heights right now are just astronomical. As far as the tall, trying to pole vault your way into the bed. There are adaptive pieces that you can get to help. If you've got a toilet that's too low, you can get a toilet riser. We always, of course, suggest getting handles on that for a nice push off for safety. As far as the comfy chair, you may look at furniture risers. Some people go to lift chairs. It just depends on what you need there. And then the bed height, I always suggest that I love for people to bring the bed down to them if that's an option.
Sure.
But some of those options, I always say, hey, if you're in the market for a new mattress, please check and see if you can order a special box spring that's only 4 inches tall instead of the normal 6 inches tall. And check your mattress height, because you really want that a decent height. Because if you're getting off the bed and if you have to actually start sliding off the bed before your feet touch the floor, you're increasing your fall risk. So those 3 main areas.
Yeah, and I never really thought about bed height before. I've thought of the other two and come in contact with them often, but I feel when you're talking about pole vaulting into the bed, that's what I have to do. I've got to get a running start, so I can get in. So where do people go to buy these toilet riser with handles, these other adaptive technologies, or I'm sorry, adaptive equipments? Where would you go and buy those?
A lot of times it depends on if they're a bathroom item. Unfortunately, they are not typically covered by Medicare, and a lot of insurances will follow suit with Medicare. Now, one of the healthcare advantage or the Medicare Advantage plans may have stipulations and may cover some of that, but not typically. So what I suggest is you can always go to a local medical supply store. If you are an Amazon shopper, you can check on Amazon. The big thing we always tell people is you've got to know your measurements. If you're looking for a toilet riser, do you have a standard or an oval toilet? Because hygiene products are usually not returnable.
Yeah.
So
another place they could look, Kosta, is they could go to their local lending closet. Look online for your local health equipment lending closet. A lot of times, larger cities will do equipment drives a couple times a year, and they will collect gently used equipment, and then they will refurbish it and then lend it out for free or low charge to community members. If it's unusable, they will still take it. They'll recycle it, keep it out of the landfill, and then take that money, the recycle money, and put it back into their not-for-profit organization. So that's a great way to help yourself as far as your pocketbook is concerned, as well as the environment too. So
yes.
I love that. That is great. So let's talk about home modifications. Christina, what specific home modifications or strategies do you recommend to create a safer, more accessible environment for those wishing to age in place while living with dementia or other disabilities?
Yeah, and dementia in particular, that's always such a tough one. I think just, working in long-term care like I have, the majority of my patients always want to age in place. You ask anybody, and yes, I want to go home and I want to age in place. And so we always try to address it as wherever you call home, because you do have those people that are comfortable living in congregate living like that. But as far as with somebody living with dementia, there are so many things that a person can do as far as the environment, and it's not major changes that need to be made. It just needs to be, you just need to think about what makes that person comfortable. Maybe make sure that you've got pictures of family members up. Lighting is always an issue. Maybe sometimes person living with dementia, they've done studies where they've linked vision issues with people with dementia. And so make sure that there's adequate lighting, there's natural lighting, put motion sensor lights in areas that are kind of dark. That way, when they walk by, it floods that area, especially the floor. As a person advances with dementia, their vision, instead of looking straight ahead or up, they tend to look more down towards the floor. So while they're walking, then tend to put those motion sensor lights when they walk by, and it will flood their path. Of course, make sure that your pathways and stuff like that are clear. Try to keep the home as clutter-free as possible. When it comes to color contrast, that's huge. To make sure that if you're putting their plate on a white placemat on the table, maybe make sure you use a red plate for that contrast. But and not all color contrasts work for every person. It's different for each person. Find out what your loved one, what that contrast works for your loved one. And so it's just things like that. If they've got a routine, make sure that you know what their routine is. Lots of times people living with dementia are still able to live functionally independent, but you might have to write out the instructions. No big deal. It still makes them independent, right? It's not what they did when they were 21, but it's certainly still functional and it's independent. And the bottom line on that is dignity. For me, that's just huge. And I think anybody that's got a loved one that wants to age in place, do it with dignity and being able to provide an adult to be able to live as independently, as functionally independent as possible is really the biggest gift I think you could give your loved one.
Where do you go to find these types of resources? Like the knowledge that you have, obviously you've learned from being a part of the industry and working with people that have disabilities. But where does like your average Joe go? Is there a website? Is there resources available to them in the community so that they can get these types of, like I would have never thought about putting pictures up on the wall of family members so that, you know, especially when you have like late stages of dementia, that's a great idea. But where does somebody go to find that out?
You know, the first place we usually tell people to go is to go to their area agency on aging. Every state has a handful, if not more, area agencies on aging. They are federally funded. That's usually where your Meals on Wheels program comes through. They do the senior health insurance programs to help seniors with understand their insurance. Sometimes they will help people with living with disabilities, and they will, like ours in particular, is really big. We have an Air Force base near us, so they're very helpful for the veterans as well.
Yeah.
So I would find out who is your local area agency on aging. Kosta, you would be surprised how many people we run across that don't know who their AAA is. And I would find out who my AAA is. They are a wealth of information, especially when it comes to tapping those resources within the community that are available to those individuals. So that would be the first place I would start as far as finding more resources to tap into. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Cindy, from a physical therapist perspective, what aspects of home design are often overlooked but can significantly impact a senior's ability to age in place safely?
Mm-hmm. I think the two biggest ones for me is, especially if, you know, when we're younger, we never think about these different things, but I think the entry and exit to the home, how you're getting in, how you're getting out, and the bathroom setup, especially the shower. You know, so many homes that I am in all of the time have the tub shower combinations. It makes it very difficult and very unsafe at times to get in and get out as people age. That is a big hang up for a lot of people, and getting in and out of the house, because there's so many, you know, there's steps here, there's steps there, there's, you know, the second story, all those types of things. But I think really the entry and exit, because I hear all the time, I've got so many doctor's appointments, I've got to get out, I got to get out of my house. So those things are very top priority, I would say.
You know, if I can add just one small thing that I've noticed while performing minor home modifications, there are some alternatives that don't require you to take your entire tub and surround out and replace it with a shower. There's this thing that I think is rather genius. It's called a tub cut. Yeah, it's really, it doesn't work if you have like a cast iron tub, but you know, those are far and few between nowadays. But if you have like a acrylic surround, you cut a piece out of it and you stick this like thing on where you cut, and you use like a compound to seal it. And it has like a little door even sometimes you can put on it. And I think, and it's really not that expensive. I mean, relative to doing an entire, modification to your home, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I think there's so many great items and ideas like that out there.
Yeah. It is ingenious. And what we find lots of times, Kosta, is that we get companies that reach out to us, and usually the majority of them are companies that have been founded by former caregivers. They found this particular product helped them during their caregiver journey. And so they turn entrepreneur when their caregiver journey ends. And so they reach out to us, and it's usually a mom and pop. We get the whole story about how it came to be. And it's just, the people are just ingenious. They're just, necessity is the mother of invention, and it couldn't be further from the truth whenever we hear these stories all the time.
Yeah.
How do I phrase this? Sorry. What's the most effective way to identify the appropriate home modifications and adaptive equipment to meet an individual's specific needs?
Yeah. We think the most effective way, and, this sometimes goes into being a little bit more proactive, but, you've got to have a home assessment. You've got to have a therapist come out, an occupational therapist, a physical therapist, to come out and really assess the individual needs. Because there are so many things that you learn when you're in those people's environments. You learn a little bit more about them. and then you can kind of problem solve. You can try to do the most efficient and effective changes. Or maybe there doesn't need to be large changes. Maybe there's a piece of equipment, kind of like the tub cutout, rather than tearing out a shower. But we can't express enough really getting that assessment to really find out, because, everything doesn't work for everybody. And, it's...
What conditions should you be aware of? Or is it like if somebody starts falling repeatedly, is that when you should get the assessment? Is there something that happens, an inflection of some kind, that says, okay, I think it's time for us to take the next steps?
I think that we usually call it any type of changing condition, whether it is falling. And a lot of times, I like to tell people, again, we really try to encourage people to be proactive. But even if you see a loved one, or if you yourself feel like you start to even what we call furniture cruise, you're starting to hold on to stuff as you're walking through the house, or you've had some trips and stumbles, but not literally fallen to the floor. Or if there's a change in condition, maybe, you just feel like you're getting a little bit weaker. Things that you used to do are becoming a little bit harder to do. Anything like that is a good indication that, hey, it's time just to at least get a professional opinion. And, when we come out, or when any professional comes out, they can always give you suggestions. And what we like to do is rank them in what probably should be done right now and is the easiest to do right now. And then what are some future goals, or some things that maybe we can put on the back burner and let people choose what they want to do, but at least have that written out so that you kind of know what to expect.
And there's a statistic about falling. When a person falls, they're
50%. It doubles their chance basically to fall a second time.
And a lot of people don't tell their doctor that they had a fall. So
really,
I mean, there's just that's
a 50%.
People. And that's a huge gap to not tell people. And then if you fall once and you have it doubles your risk of falling again, and you didn't tell anybody about it, there's a lot of people out there that we could help. We need to help.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times there's a stigma, and I speak about this a lot, but I think there's a stigma when you get to a point to where you age and an injury may occur. You don't want to lose control, autonomy, and independence. And like you were saying earlier, you don't want to lose, dignity. And so you try to, and this is not what I recommend doing, but a lot of people, they try to go until they absolutely can't anymore. And at that point, their overall health in decline has gotten to an untenable point. So,
right. Yeah. That's huge. And it's important, I feel like, for caregivers, for family caregivers, then to kind of stay, to stay present in that, your loved ones in their life, and try to take in some of that information and reach out to people that have the resources. So
I am curious, if somebody needs access to a physical therapist or an occupational therapist assessment, is that something that Medicare would pay for, or is there an agency that they can reach out to? How does that process work?
Usually what we like you to do is yes, try to reach out to your primary care doctor initially, let them know what's going on, and they can make a referral. Therapy can always come in, the majority of the time it's going to be covered, even just an evaluation. There are a lot of times that I may go into a home and evaluate somebody, and we decide, hey, you're doing okay. We've gone over some things. It was an evaluation only. But yeah, there's always, if there's any type of change in condition, that's well warranted to at least get an evaluation.
Yeah. And before a loved one, let's say a loved one goes into the hospital for some acute reason, that's always a good time for the family caregiver to go through the home, get a home safety checklist, go through their home before they bring their loved one home, go through the house, find their areas that they're concerned about, and take it back to the therapy department or to a social worker before they bring their loved one home. So that healthcare facility can at least help address and validate that caregiver's concerns.
Absolutely. Can you discuss the role of technology in promoting aging in place and how it can be integrated with home modifications and adaptive equipment to provide a more comprehensive support system for seniors?
Yeah, exactly. I think the smart home technology I think we're really at that point now where it's going to be, when I first started in long-term care, we didn't see a lot of smartphones and tablets and stuff like that. And as we've gone on, you start seeing the family caregivers bringing in tablets. And of course, now 80% of the population has a smartphone now, right? So we're seeing more and more of that. Cindy and I live in Illinois, and we had the opportunity to go to our Illinois Assistive Technology program in Springfield, Illinois. And boy, the way they had theirs set up is they have smart rooms set up that a family member or an individual can walk through and find out what kind of smart technology is out there, and then have it implemented and learn more about it, and then have it implemented into what they think would be helpful. They had a smart living room. They had, with all the smart hugs, they had a smart kitchen, a smart laundry room, a smart bedroom, and a smart bathroom in there. And everything was connected to one of the virtual assistants. And some of the stuff that it was amazing. Yeah. And so, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, it's just, I didn't realize some of that stuff was out there even. So, and we work with it all the time, and it just makes sense. But I really think that it's going to be helpful in helping those individuals that are wanting to age in place. And not only those people, but their loved ones, their family caregivers, to be able to give them that space to age in place and keep their dignity and allow them to be that adult and still have that child-parent relation, that loving relationship, instead of always be harping on a mom and dad, weren't you doing this kind of stuff. So I really see smart technology and home mods like that, including being included in home modifications, as really helping that a lot, those relationships a lot.
I have a colleague in Tennessee whose mom lives in Massachusetts, and she's, I believe, in her 80s now, but she's a fall risk, and she has some other health conditions that she's working through. So my colleague incorporates a sensor system throughout the entire home. And one of the interesting aspects there's a lot of features that it has, but one of the most interesting is it will alert her if she has stayed over a certain period of time in one spot. And so, a lot of times, especially somebody that is a fall risk, they have that, PERS, personal emergency response system, that necklace where they can push the button. But some people don't like to sleep in it, and they take it off, and then they don't put it back on. And I think one of the beautiful things about technology is when you start using it, it only improves. It only gets better. It becomes more functional. It identifies what doesn't work, and then you create technology that's even better, right? And so that's one of the things as I see us progressing in the long-term care industry is, I don't think that there's ever going to be enough support for one human being to care for another human being, and that be the only way things can happen. I just don't think that there's enough of those ones to care for the other one.
Unfortunately, it feels like at this point right now, people are going into healthcare facilities and they're getting all that skilled care. And then when they go back to their home, all of that skilled care and know-how falls on the family caregiver's shoulders. And I feel like that technology is at least going to help give them the tools that they need to be able to, to monitor, to know what's next as far as actual providing that physical care. But we are at that point where all of that care is falling on the family caregiver, and it's a tough situation.
And they're not in the medical profession. A lot of the times, Yeah. And
the chances of them getting hurt providing physical care increases exponentially too.
Yeah. I will say, as a physical therapist, there's one component of technology that I don't think that we put enough emphasis on, and it's probably just because it's a lot more expensive than developing smaller sensors or little cameras or alarms, things like that. But it's the mechanical technology. It's the electric Hoyer lifts that people use in nursing facilities. But how do you make something that people would be willing to use in their own home? Like ceiling track systems. There's so many different mechanical tech that is missing from maybe not in facilities, but definitely in people who are just middle-class Americans who are trying to afford caring for someone, let alone buying a piece of equipment.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where I would tend to tell individuals, especially when they first become caregivers and they're running around with their hair on fire because it's a lot. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
Go to your area agency on aging, find out what resources are available, find your local lending closet. Why buy it before you try it? Maybe it won't work for you. Then you've got all this money out of your pocket. And then also check for your assisted technology program in your state. Almost every state has one. And some of them have some really great lending programs and reuse programs. They've got lending like with this augmentative and alternative communication devices that they could lend out. They've got reuse programs where they've got wheelchairs and walkers and canes and all kinds of stuff that they can lend out.
So if we're talking about things like building a wheelchair ramp, or if we're talking about putting in a walk-in shower, I think we can all agree one of the scariest parts of home modifications is the price. Are there any cost-effective strategies you recommend before we literally rip our entire house apart?
That, again, I'm going to fall back to please make sure you get some type of professional assessment, because there are ways around, there are corners to cut, but it has to be a safe corner to cut, and so I really think, getting that assessment, getting that one-on-one to really find out the specific needs. And then the other thing is maybe, the individual thinks, well, I've got this area, and this area, and we have to rip the whole thing out. Well, maybe we can save on this one and put a little bit more here, but it's getting that individualized assessment that's going to help to be the most cost effective, I think, just in doing that.
So before we wrap up, I'm going to ask you kind of a broad technical question, and I may be a little long-winded, so bear with me here. All right, so you've been working in minor home modifications, adaptive equipment for how long now?
Probably our careers, but
Okay. Well, adaptive equipment and caregiving corner, we've been doing this since probably 2015. Yeah.
Okay. So something that I've noticed while being in this industry, and I've been doing this for about 12 years, when they were building all of these homes in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, why did they build them so that wheelchairs couldn't fit in all the doorways? Why did they always only put in a tub shower combo? It seems, and if you go back to like the 70s and 60s especially, like these doorways are like, some of them are 20 inches. They're tiny. You know what I'm saying? And so I don't understand. Do you have any thoughts as to why these homes are not adapted for either multi-generational housing or aging in place? Like, what did they think was going to happen when you needed to be in a wheelchair or something of that nature?
I'm not 100%. Well, it's that's a good question.
Were people smaller then?
Maybe, right?
We just got bigger over time, where everybody just shot up and started getting bigger and broader. And
that is a good question.
I don't think wheelchairs have changed much, but
yeah, and wheelchairs really the component that I'm most curious about, because even if you don't consider the population getting larger, I still think like, okay, well, wheelchairs have been generally the same size. And so many times I go into people's homes to do an assessment as you're describing, And it's always some kind of door widening that's included, that's necessary for people to safely, to actually even be able to enter or exit a room. So I was always fascinated by that. But.
Who set the standard for a wheelchair then, if that's the case?
Right. Or who set the building standards?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's probably, depending on. I just don't think people thought about it. I don't think it was brought to the forefront until, you start having the things like the Americans with Disabilities Act and things like that that really started bringing people's awareness to those facts. And
life expectancy probably wasn't as long then either. Back then when they were building that, we've gone up quite a bit, So.
And I think it's fascinating how far we've come, talking about the American with Disabilities Act. But also, I believe why a lot of this has happened is because at that time, we weren't planning on aging in place. We were planning on considering a nursing facility once a fall happened or a broken hip, one of the most common injuries that people experience. And once, with 80% of Americans wanting to stay in their own home, this sort of rubber meets the road, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think with that too, you've got to think about the medical technology now, even with some of those things that are going on, I'm sure in the past, a broken hip meant a lot different circumstance than what it does now.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. Good point.
And so that might play into it as well.
So we always like to end the show with a call to action. What's one thing we can all do today to make our community and world a safer, more adaptive place to live?
Well, and I've said it a couple of times already, Kosta. I for myself, I feel like making sure that as a family caregiver, as an individual wanting to age in place, know who your area agency on aging is. Know that they've got a ton of resources out there. Know that you have there could be a lending closet close by, that you might have an assistive technology program close by. And know that you don't have to do this by yourself. If you're the family caregiver, you do not have to do this by yourself. There's a ton of services, of people in this industry that are just, are willing to help and do what they can for the good of the population.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say too, if you're an individual or a caregiver of a loved one and the plan is that I want to age in place, then we can't preach enough to try to be proactive with those things.
That's
try to look forward and look into the future about, hey, well, is this going to work for me when I or if this happens, or if this is going to work for me, but really try to be proactive in your, quest for aging in place.